All right. Welcome back to D&D&D&D&D. When we last left off on Of Black Ink and Blue Blood, the party taken by the Kingdom of Barbarous to be transported to an unknown scientist who would assail them with various experiments, managed to escape by the skin of their teeth and by the water of lungs. uh, After some very serious inter-party conflict, the party worked their way back to Zephyr's home of the Tibadran city of Rosewick, meeting up with their old pal Q along the way. Uh, Zephyr reuniting with his father, the king, the party began some negotiations with the Bandit Kingdom. And after some prodding, the Bandit King revealed that while he was indeed in an alliance with the Kingdom of Barbarous, he fancies himself getting out of it by hiring the party as more or less mercenaries to take down Barbarous and their allies for whatever cause they may represent. And in exchange, they are offering information and a guarantee of an alliance with the Shadow Lily Confederacy should the party succeed, or start to succeed, rather. And to coax the reluctant Zephyr, the king revealed that he has information regarding your birth family, Zephyr. And with that, is escorting the party to the dining room where you had met their family previously. What would you guys like to do?
I'm just gonna go with it. I'm looking forward to the feast.
I think, yeah, I'll just go along with it for now.
Okay. Zephyr?
Zephyr will follow, but he will be quiet.
Okay. The king escorts you to the dining room with the queen in tow, to the dining room where you had previously met with the Tibadran royal family. Because of the short notice, there is no food or drink immediately prepared. But the king is very snappy about sending some servants off to start preparations, and specifically sends Zephyr among the servants is, as always, your older brother Loop, who he sends to fetch something from his personal chambers. Your brother giving you a nod and the rest of you a bow before leaving to do so. The king and queen sit at the head of the dining table as you guys take your seats, awaiting the food and whatever the king has requested from his chambers. Is there anything the three of you would like to do while you wait? The king seems somewhat fidgety and impatient, but willing to wait until things are a bit more comfortable and at ease before getting into business.
Joel's just gonna sit back in his chair and relax.
Lucian, as always, is going to be sitting up properly and just keeping a sharp eye on the king and Zephyr. She doesn't really have anything to say for now, and also like on her side eye, she's gonna keep an eye on her son. I don't care what anybody says. He's my son now.
She's got like 3 eyeballs. One.
Pietro, as always, seems somewhat fidgety and nervous, but is patiently following along, trusting the party to keep him relatively safe.
She's got the 2 pairs of eyes. One, 2 fixated on the king and me, and then her mother eyes in the back watching her baby.
Yeah,
it's true.
Speaking of which, Zephyr, do you have anything you'd like to do before food and whatever the king has requested arrives?
No, Zephyr, I mean, especially if she's going to look at me, if she's going to keep an eye on me, I guess she'll see Zephyr just sort of distracted, looking at the table, kind of like down, just looking down at the table, just off in space.
The king and queen look to each other, and you can almost just see like a silent conversation play out between the two of them. these people who have known each other and loved each other for a presumably very long time, given their ripe age, just having a very quiet, silent conversation between themselves, with nothing but glances and vague gestures. Eventually, after a very quiet and somewhat awkward a few minutes, an array of food and drink is brought out to all of you. A very similar assortment to what was served before, a aesthetically messy and unappealing but functional and delicious set of food. And after a moment, Zephyr, your brother, comes in with a series of scrolls and parchment just tucked neatly under his arms, which he hands to your father, who takes them and kind of goes over them quickly, running his beady little eyes over them before nodding and waving Loop off with a just very vague, dismissive gesture. You may go. And you see your brother kind of looks visibly surprised and glances to you before just closing his eyes and taking a breath and nodding before clapping his hands, and the rest of the servants follow him out. As everyone clears out of the room, leaving the group of you alone, the king starts to unfold the parchment and scrolls in front of him with a nod towards the door and says, "This is something I've kept rather private, especially from family. So Zephyr, consider yourself privileged." And he kind of gives one of his familiar like needle tooth. He takes one of the parchment pieces and waves it towards all of you and says, "Now, they've deliberately been keeping me somewhat out of the loop, almost like they thought I'd betray them or something," and waves to all of you with a kind of smile and a chuckle. Don't know where they would have gotten that. And he kind of points to you and kind of does like finger guns essentially before his face goes serious again, and he slides some of the parchment forward, and he gestures to what you, especially you guys who have lived among nobility, recognize instantly as a series of letters of private communications, very immediate material that can be recognized as blackmail. And the king begins to speak. "I don't know the extent of who's involved exactly, but I know it goes high up. We're calling ourselves, I didn't pick the name, the Scar Concord, an alliance of kingdoms and other peoples looking for power that have decided to work together. I've not met all the members myself. I'm being deliberately kept out of the loop, as I said, but I do know of a few, and I have my suspicions of others. The ones I do know for sure that happen to be included," and he gestures to some of the letters as he speaks. "I don't know if she's the one in charge, but I know she has a high-ranking position. Lysandra Wyborn II, current queen of the Wyborn Kingdom. President Mentha Ergos of the Ergos Republic. Governor Barbarous of the kingdom of the same name. And the one that's going to be particularly relevant to you," and he pushes one of the pieces of parchment forward, "Father Nicholas Humor, the Khan of the Humor Empire."
Who is this?
Is that out of character or in?
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
Well, both.
Was I cutting out, by the way, or you just didn't?
I guess I just didn't catch it.
The last one was Father Nicholas Humor, the Khan of the Humor Empire.
Why is this one so particularly interested in us?
Yeah, I was gonna say for Lucian, I'm sure some of these names seem very familiar to her.
Make a history check.
You too.
Yeah, go for it.
Not bad. Ooh.
That's gonna be a bad night for me.
Might
So
have
Lucian,
to run after all.
Lucian, you know of them, although you don't know a lot of specifics. You know, and Gil, this applies to you too, but then I'll specify what specifically applies to you and not Lucian. Both of you know that these while Barbarous being involved is news to you, you do know that the Wyborn Kingdom and the Argos Republic have been very close allies for a very long time, as long as both kingdoms have been around, in fact. You are aware of the existence of the Humor Empire, although they normally keep to themselves, being a somewhat small and recently formed empire. However, Gil, with your very direct and personal upbringing in political matters, are aware of more of the specifics. The Argos Republic was a sort of local sect of the Thieves Guild that grew in power and wealth before eventually declaring themselves their own kingdom and basically taking over the cities where they had influence. And that birthed the Argos Republic, which immediately swore an indefinite fealty to the Wyborn Kingdom. The Wyborn Kingdom, though, being involved in something like this is rather surprising to you, as while you've never met her personally, you have heard stories of the Queen, and she has always been described as this beautiful, elegant, and very kind and direct woman who just nobody ever has a negative word to say of her. So her being involved in something like this is surprising to you. What doesn't surprise you is the Humor Empire's involvement. The Humor Empire was originally a series of ogre and giant nations of sorts that eventually combined after a human assassin took out one of the giant chieftains and took his place. And you know that the Humor Empire has started a bloody and very unsettling reign of violence and tyranny over the surrounding area. So them being involved is not shocking to you in the slightest. They are only kept away from the borders of other kingdoms in the current waging against all giant tribes who do not swear fealty to them.
I guess their humor is very, well, not funny.
The king smiles. Everyone says that.
So these are
the Scar Concord.
Yeah, the Concord. So what is this exactly? Is it like an uprising?
He scratches the back of his neck and says, that's the thing. As I said, I'm on the bottom of this food chain. They've kept the specifics away from me as much as possible. My job was to keep doing what I was already doing and make sure to deliver a cut of it to Barbarous and Wyborn, especially if it involved magical items or people. Why they want them, I can't say. They're keeping me in the dark as much as possible, as if that makes it me less likely to stab them. But I do know something that will be useful to you. The reason that the Humor Empire is particularly relevant to you right now is, as most of you among noble families already know, the summer ball is going to be in a couple of weeks, specifically in the humor capital of Mercurial.
What's going to be there?
Yeah, you cut out.
Yeah, sorry, my internet's a little on the fuzzy side right now. If I need to repeat anything, just say the word. I don't mind. The summer ball is going to be held in the capital, the humor capital of Mercuriald.
Oh, a summer ball. So, is it that time already?
Yeah. It seems a little early for that.
He gives a bit of a shrug and says, well, you know how it is. Tradition, life or death. And he taps his finger on one of the pieces of parchment, which you recognize to the summer ball. And he continues. Of course, as all of you from noble families know, this is just a tradition for the royalty of the continent to meet and pretend to be civil twice a year. But I do know that the Scar Concord uses it as a place for their members to gather without any suspicion being aroused. And that's your chance to scope things out, and if you decide to take me up on my job offer, pick your targets.
So you're wanting us to go to this ball and do what exactly? Take care of them? She's gonna have air quotes.
He smiles and says, frankly, if you can get rid of all of them over the course of the ball, I'll be so impressed that you can have their kingdoms if you want. But that's not what I'm asking you to do. If you decide to take me up on my job offer and cause some trouble among the Scar Concord with the information I've been able to provide you and anything else I'm able to scrounge up, then the ball makes the perfect opportunity for all of you to meet your potential enemies and figure out what you want to do first. And remember, while I don't know everyone who's involved, I do know that all of them are going to be there, which means you may find some people I've missed.
Which meaning you want the information.
They are, we will tell you.
He smiles. He smiles at the two of you, leaning on one hand. Now you're getting it. And he leans back and says, now, of course, it may arouse some suspicion for all of you, some more than others, and he glances at you, Zephyr, to be there showing your faces, but luckily, most of them won't recognize you on sight, and it's not that unusual for a handsome, powerful royal to bring some servants along.
I was going to say we could probably pass Zephyr off as a servant. I have done it before.
I think, my dear, he's planning to pass us off as his servants.
I don't think...
Would I be right, oh wise king?
He just gives a smile and says, I think it's a rather clever plan.
Lucian looks incredulous.
He raises an eyebrow, and he raises an eyebrow. Do you have a better idea? Because to get an invitation to this is no easy feat. You being servants would immediately excuse your presence and lower the amount of suspicion you may have just wandering around doing whatever it is you do.
Like a servant to you. She's going to give Gil a very dirty look.
She could count as an escort, maybe.
An escort? Really?
Yeah, you're right with that now.
Zephyr, you see your mom just like putting a hand to her mouth, like trying to hide her giggling, basically.
Yeah. So what's the problem?
Zephyr is like a child. I don't think like any effort would ever be around him. I mean, no offense, lizard boy, but I mean, look at you.
Yes, I'm small, and that means that I can hide in much better spots. But so what I'm hearing is that you said that I can be a servant, and that's no problem, but yet you can't even handle it yourself.
He leans back and says, they're doing all of this, and he gestures to the parchments and scrolls, to give me as little information as possible. if they're willing to do all of this just to keep me from getting information, then what do you think they'd do to stop me if I was actually physically a threat to them? But the three of you, well, four, and he gestures to Pietro, they have no idea who you are or what you could possibly do to them. The only one who even knows you're around is Barbarous, and, well, even if you happen to run across him, as long as your disguise game is above average, it shouldn't be a problem.
Honestly, I think that we should be delivering Pietro to his where he needs to be and deliver the letter that you not go to risky situation. I mean, I love this little boy, but he's, like I said, he's a little boy. He doesn't need to be going to these things.
Pietro just kind of nods slowly, and the king raises a hand. Already planned and taken care of. On the way there, we'll actually be passing by the Shadow Lily Confederacy. You can make a quick pit stop.
And as for disguises, he was going to put his hat on, and he's going to turn into the queen.
Oh.
You see the queen kind of gets like a broad smile, and you watch as she raises a hand and essentially pulls her palm back to be pointing her wrist forward, and you watch as she turns into you.
Oh.
The king just kind of rolls his eyes and claps before saying, "Well, if the both of you are done showing off," and he chuckles and leans back and kicks his little legs up on the table.
Let me
Not a bad idea. I'm sorry.
Let me understand what you're trying to imply here. Zephyr is going to be in charge.
What?
No.
What did it say?
No.
He never said me. What?
We will be.
I was under
servants.
I was under the impression that we were going in with Zephyr.
No. If they see that Zephyr is with me and not being delivered wherever they were trying to take you, then I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Being my servants means you have a express ticket to get into the ball, and then what you do once you're in there is your business.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Well, it's not the worst thing that's happened to me.
Though maybe a little bit of coin for all this servant work, might help.
He leans forward and kind of places his head on the back of his hand, just kind of smirking at you, and says, "I suppose you're right." And he taps his.
After all.
Maybe.
Aren't we getting information?
No, information's power, but this is benefiting him as much as it is us. So I think a little bit of coin can't hurt.
Let it not be said, I don't pay people what they earn. And he taps the sides of his chair in thought before finally speaking up. I'll decide on an amount that's appropriate to whatever you can give me if you decide to share after the ball is over. But that depends on what you do while you're there and what you decide to do afterwards. Says my connection's good. I don't know why it's doing that.
Matt? Hello?
Okay, sorry, I lost internet.
Oh.
Oh, okay. So, Austin, could you hear me okay?
Sorry.
I think you cut out once, but for the most part, I heard you.
Okay. Can everyone hear each other?
Yes, I'm back.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, you guys have been cutting out just a little bit for me, but it's mostly been distinguishable.
Okay, so it maybe should be just Discord being Discord then.
Yeah.
One unfortunate thing about using online services for streams. Okay, so is everyone good then?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So where were we? Sorry.
You were the king was
Thinking
running his
about
fingers
gold.
on the outside
Right, yes. After a bit of thought, he says, well, let it not be said, I don't pay people what they earn. So I'll decide on an amount based on what you decide to share and what you end up accomplishing while you're there, and what you decide to do afterwards.
Fair enough.
And he raises a hand and says, and if you happen to be worried about me going back on my word of payment, and he gestures out the dining room window, and you can see the activity is starting to decline as the sun begins to set, but you can still see some activity among the bandits. And he says, do you think I could maintain all and give people what I thought they deserved?
No, no.
He smiles and leans back and looks to all of you. So, do we have a deal?
We have a deal. So, will we be armed, or do we need to look a little bit more?
I'll admit that's something I hadn't considered.
Because going into
Zephyr, my boy.
ball with, well,
Yes.
maybe not a good idea.
We should at least look our best if it's one of those balls.
He smiles. I'm afraid it is, but you have a bit of leeway. And he looks to you.
Yes.
They do make a fair point. I can't just have you go in there without armaments, but at the same time, it may, of course, arouse suspicions for my servants and butlers to be armed to the teeth, as they say. So, do you think you'd be up to smuggling in your party's armaments over the city's walls and placing them somewhere? I'll try to arrange for all of you to have somewhere to stay.
Well, I could probably handle a few, but I don't think I can carry the entire party's armaments.
That's fair enough. Well, and he looks to all the rest of you. Anything you can't hide on your person, Zephyr will do his absolute best to smuggle in for you, unless you want to fancy trying to smuggle them past the guards yourselves.
Honestly, all I need is my uh my focus, which is this, and she's gonna show her sigil.
He gives a smile and says, spellcasters, some of my favorite infiltrators. And you? And he looks to you again.
Plus my daggers. Few things I can smuggle in. My sleeves.
He gives a nod and says, all right. Then I suppose we have a deal. And he claps his hands, and the servants, including your brother Zephyr, come back in, and he says, the ball will be taking place in about 2 weeks from now, and it will take about a week to get there by cart. You can choose who drives. So as long as we're ready to go in about a week, we should be arriving just on time.
Oh, so maybe we should arrive a day or two early so we can scope out the area.
He gives a shrug and says, I'll need at least 2 or 3 days. Zephyr, your brother should be returning home from his academy training soon, so I want to make sure he's able to attend. And he kind of gives a very sinister, dark look. He gives a very sinister, dark look and says, because as we know, the Concord has an excellent track record with not taking away my thing. And he holds up his hand, and the queen entwines it with hers. Well, I'll see to it that your favorite bedrooms are reserved for you. And he nods to you, Lucian. And he glances to Pierre. That will be taken care of as soon as we're in range of the city. Do you remember what city you picked them?
She's having internet issues.
Hello?
Hello?
I'm back.
Hello?
Sorry, you were breaking up pretty terribly for me. I wasn't hearing
Well,
it.
it's, yeah, it's all good.
Do you remember which city we got Pietro from?
Didn't he come with us with the president?
Yes, you got him.
Like the first city we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't have my notes on me, so.
Perha.
Yes.
He gives a smile and says, then I'll see it done. He waves a hand as the two leading royals begin to turn their backs to the dining room. If you should have need of anything, you're free to hall or here. And he glances to the servants as they begin clearing out whatever food you guys haven't already dipped into.
Of course, nothing is said without outside of these walls.
He smiles. There it is. And he gives all of you a very sarcastic bow, the queen doing the same before they walk out. And you four, technically with Pietro, are left at the dining table with the servants just kind of going here and there to gather up whatever you haven't already dipped into.
Lucian is going to open up her backpack once they leave and take out the mace that she is not using, and she's going to hand it to Pietro. And she's going to say, I want you to keep this on you. It is very easy to use. You just hit the people with the sharp end.
Lucian, can he even hold that?
I don't know, can you?
To your surprise, you see Pietro take it, and he kind of gives it an experimental lift to kind of test its weight before kind of edging back in his seat and giving it a not super wide to avoid collateral damage, but a fairly, not necessarily expert, but respectable little swing. And he smiles. Messengers were trained for self-defense. I can't use like a sword or a bow or anything, but they taught us how to use clubs and maces and things if we needed to.
Well, it's a good thing that I had that on me then. That is yours, a gift from me.
He smiles and kind of hugs it close to himself.
Well, Gil's going to head towards the market to find a blacksmith.
Okay. You already interacted with a blacksmith last time you were here, so you know where to find it. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to do?
No, I think I was the one who interacted with the blacksmith.
I'm trying to figure out how to take that out of my equipment now.
Oh, just click on it, I think, and then just do remove on the bottom. Or like kind of like after all the information, just click on it, and then on the right, just click remove.
Okay. You got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Zephyr will just leave the dining room.
All right. Lucian, would you, or with Pietro by extension, have anything you want to do before just settling in?
Pietro, what kind of armor do you have on?
And you see him kind of wriggle a bit before just gesturing to his just civvies, basically. It's not paper thin, but it's clearly more made for comfort and practicality than armor. A very simple vestment of leathers and that canvas-like cloth material to keep himself protected from the elements.
I have some studded leather that we can get fitted for you If you want it, I'm not going to use it since I've got this beautiful scale mail.
He kind of wriggles a bit and says, "It sounds like you guys might need it more than me if I'm just going to be staying in the city."
Honestly, the scale mail, I don't know. Zephyr probably can't use it.
What, scale mail?
No, the studded leather.
Well, he could.
I mean, can you use it, Zephyr?
Out of character? I mean, are you asking me, like, in character? Oh. I mean, I can
have
use it. I mean, I have light. I do have some light armor training.
Would you like some studded armor so that you can, not be so squishy?
I mean, are you sure you want to give that to me?
She's going to give him a very cold look. If I don't give this to you, I am not, I'm not responsible then. I feel more responsible with you not having it on. So if you do have it on and you die, that's your own damn fault.
Feeling the love in this party.
Well, I already left, so.
So you can either take it or I'll keep it, and who knows, maybe somebody else might want it.
Again, if you were willing to give it to me, then sure.
Look, I'm feeling very generous. My mother taught me to be very generous. So she's gonna take it out of her bag and hand it to Zephyr.
Alright. Zephyr then takes off his leather armor. Right there. And then once he takes off the leather armor, he's just gonna throw his leather armor to Pietro, because why
not? Pietro kind of nervously kind of fumbles it before clutching it, and kind of looks to it and looks to you as if he's not quite sure what to make of it or do with it before kind of just settling and clutching it along with the mace.
It should fit him better.
Do you want me to help you put that on Pietro?
And he you see him kind of blush and start fidgeting before he finally, if you don't mind, I've never really worn proper armor before.
That's okay. I can teach you how to put it on, and that way you can take it on and you can take it off. You always want to remember to take it off when you go to bed, because it's very uncomfortable if you don't.
You see him just kind of staring at you and nodding, very, very enraptured. A young child sincerely paying attention to the adult.
Lucian will teach him how to put it on and show him how to adjust it. And...
While she does that, I'm just going to leave as planned.
Yeah. Okay. Zephyr, do you have any real plans, or are you just kind of just chilling?
I would like to see the king.
Okay. Lucian?
Yes.
And quite some time teaching Pietro. He's a quick learner and gets the hang of it rather quickly. How to don and doff his new set of slightly used leather armor. You see him kind of visibly a bit uncomfortable as some remnants of the wounds Zephyr has taken before are still kind of showing on it. But it fits, and despite his somewhat squeamishness, it's functional, and he is now somewhat more equipped than your average messenger.
Well, at least this way I know that you will be safe.
He smiles and kind of clutches the mace a bit.
Every sword and every, a weapon should have a name. I haven't named mine yet, but but you should definitely name yours.
I'll have to think about it.
She's just
One more time, sir.
she's just gonna like ruffle his hair.
Your son,
My
son
son.
boy aloud. All right. Gil, what did you want to pick up from the blacksmith?
Well, I want to sell a few things and buy a couple of things.
Okay. For the sake of brevity, what do you want to?
I want to sell 4 javelins, 2 hand axes, and a great axe.
Oh,
Okay, just a moment. Yeah, I love how you leave the room and start like just selling the stuff, whereas back in the dining room, everyone's like passing on stuff like down the ladder.
I mean, I couldn't use any of his stuff.
Yeah, it's fair.
Easier
Very
to hold
amusing
on
to me.
to money than it is to trust someone else to bring you stuff back.
Fair.
That's why I give it to them and not expect it to come back. It's called being generous.
It's called
Okay, so you're selling the javelins and what else?
4 javelins, 2 hand axes, and a great axe.
Okay, just a moment. Gotta make sure I got the prices on hand. Okay, just a moment. Sorry. Shopping. Okay, so 4 javelins. That'll get ship out. How many hand?
2.
2.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that. It's a lot. I'm doing math in my head here.
Yeah, the
could I also get like some arrows?
It'll just be the standard player's handbook price for them. So, so yes, you can absolutely do that. And Gil, in exchange for everything you sell, you get quick mental math. 26 gold back from selling all that.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
A little stingy from the merchant, but
Yeah, I will say, in fairness, like you're selling them used equipment, and they have to be able to like make a profit off of it.
yeah. It's 40,
Um,
it's 42 by with all the stuff.
Okay. And Lucian, do you want to just pick up a full quiver?
Yeah, I was going to pick up like maybe 50.
Oh.
I think that would be 5 gold.
No,
For
it's-
50 for 50 arrows, that would be 2 gold and 5 silver.
Oh, what, really?
Yeah, 20 arrows is a gold.
On here it doesn't say that. On here it says 0.05 gold P. That's weird. Like, arrows are cheap.
and then I want to
You get to repeat that.
I want to buy 4 daggers.
Wow, so many daggers.
And if he doesn't give me a good price, I'm gonna haggle with him.
Okay, so real quick, Lucian, what were you saying? Your internet was kind of giving.
Yeah, stupid whole internet. How much gold was it?
2 gold, 5 silver. And Gil. So, what are you? So, what are you looking for now?
Wants
4
to buy.
daggers.
What are you gonna do with that broken dagger?
Oh, no, I got lost. It got lost a while back.
No, you broke one trying to lockpick, and then you threw, or you tried to stab me, but you dropped it. You still have the broken dagger.
Who knows?
Okay, so so you want to just be clear, you want to buy 4 daggers?
Yes.
What are you saying?
Okay.
But if I don't get a good price, I'm gonna haggle.
I'll say maybe me an insight check. So in total, he tells you that that's going to be 8 gold. Make me an insight check to see if he's giving you a good price. As far as you can tell, he's giving you pretty much the fair market price for these daggers.
Okay. I will pay the 8 gold.
Okay. So Mark. This is why, other than like magic items, we usually kind of breeze through the shopping because it's just math. Okay, so you have sold off a good amount of equipment and gotten your daggers. Is there anything else you'd like to do while you're here?
Hang on, we're having some problems.
Oh, jeez. It's not your fault, officers. If it keeps up, we can call it a bit early and pick it up next week.
No, we're good.
Okay. It's not usually like this. Just a bit of ish this time around.
Some stuttering or lag everywhere.
Technical
I've been fine with it.
difficulties.
I've been fine with it. I'm just excited for this.
Curious when you're gonna. Are you my brother? That's what I'm wondering.
We'll get there. All right, so
Okay, I'm sorry.
Gil and Lucian, good timing. Okay, so Gil, is that everything you want to take care of while you're shopping?
Yeah. At least for
All right.
now.
Okay. And Lucian, were you able to hear me when I gave you the cost for the arrows?
Yes, I got
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so the king has requested about a 2 or 3 day, at minimum, period, to wait for the youngest of the Tibadran nobles to arrive, and then he's willing to set off at whatever time you guys prefer. He just basically said as long as we're set out a week from today, like at most. So is there anything just in general you guys would like to do over the next 2 or 3 days?
Well, I would like to talk to the king.
Right, sorry, with all the technical difficulties, almost forgot. Thank you. So Gil and Lucian will get to you. Zephyr, as your party members, in Pietro's case, head to their bedroom, and in Lucian and Gil's case, head off to do some shopping. You find the king, as per the norm, in the throne room. The guards, recognizing you, let you by without ish. And as the door shuts behind you, the king and queen, both kind of mirroring each other, lean on their hands and raise an eyebrow as you enter.
Well, I have some questions for you, Father.
He smiles and leans forward. I'm sure you do. Very tactically brilliant of you to keep things on the down low around the others. You never were one to expose vulnerabilities without kicking and screaming.
Well, that's information they don't need to know, and right now, I would like to know.
You need to know.
Well, I would like to know where you obtain this information.
He smiles and leans back, and you can see it's something that you typically only see when you are with your father, either in private or in the relative safety and privacy of the family. The wizened and aging half gnome just kind of deflates and you can see his age visibly kind of catch up to him for just a moment as he looks at you and kind of cracks a smile and sits up with a heave and leans forward on his cane. Contrary to what your friends seem to think, I'm not just rolling over and showing my belly. I've done what digging can safely be done without retaliation, or with minimal risk of it at least. That's actually part of why your brother has taken a bit longer than you did to get back here. Had to do what I could before, uh, you know. Anyway, I don't have the information to set you off on some grand quest of finding them if they're even still alive, but I was able to find this. And he holds up a letter with the same seal that you saw on all the other parchments that he displayed on the dining room table, which you presume is the mark of the Scar Concord. From what I've been able to figure out, and from some basic deductions from personal experience, while I can't be 100% sure, I feel like the Oathbreaker, Dr. Knight, has something to do with the Concord, and with that, that gives me enough information to have my suspicions that they may have had something to do with it.
And how long have you suspected this?
That's back and says, I've only had enough information to be positive for 2 months now, but I've suspected since you first came here.
And so why did you neglect to tell me this?
You see, kind of smiles, but it's that smile that doesn't reach the eyes. It's a look you've seen on your father before, but never directed at you. It's the smile you've seen him give, let's call them business partners who need to be persuaded. It's the emotionless gaze of someone who would be perfectly content forcing cooperation from someone. The gaze of a cold-hearted sociopath who smiles with their eyes completely unchanged as they look you over and says, as we discussed, you know the value of information, and until now, you were more valuable to me not knowing. You see your mother frowns and signs out in common. We do love you, but you know how this family is.
Yes, I know this family is complicated, and you have cared for me and trained me, which I appreciate. But I don't appreciate you withholding information from me.
You see the king's smile just drops completely, and he leans back with his hand still on his cane, and he shrugs a bit and says, ordinarily, I'd be a little less forthcoming, but if we're in the interest of honesty, and he kind of gives a very sarcastic smile and lets his cane kind of lean to the side a bit so he can recline in his throne a bit. What you appreciate is not my concern right now. My concern is getting myself, my kingdom, and my family out of the debt we've gotten ourselves in alive. And as it stands, I need to pull. And he looks at you and smiles. You're part of this family too, Zephyr, and you're just like the rest of us. You won't do anything without the right motivation.
Yeah, well, are correct. I am motivated to complete this mission, as long as you keep your promise and give me that information.
He stares at you and gives a nod, and he kind of does that kind of deflating motion again and taps his fingers on the side of the throne. I've given you what I can, and I'm keeping my promise. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, Dr. Knight, who I suspect is the most likely culprit behind your situation, is going to be there at the ball, as long as you know who to look for and manage to wrangle some information without arousing suspicion. You should be on the right track to find out what you want to know. What you do afterwards is your business.
Well, I guess we are going to a ball then.
The king smiles and says, "Be sure to dress up nicely." And do you leave?
Yeah, I leave.
As you open the door and begin to let it close behind you, you hear the king in a very, very small and almost defeated voice. "We do love you for what it's worth, son."
I close the door.
All right. Gil and Lucian, is there anything you'd like to do over the next couple days while the Tebadron family awaits their youngest prince's arrival?
There's a couple of things I have in mind.
All right.
First of which, I want to go scouting for more plants and herbs that might interest Summer.
Okay. Make me a survival check. While you're doing that, Lucian, what do you have planned, if anything?
I don't really think I have anything planned. No. With Pi.
Okay.
Just maybe look around the castle.
Okay. I'll say, for the heck of it, make me an investigation check. See if you can find anything noteworthy. Gil, you do not, unfortunately, find any herbs or spices that would be useful to Summer's chemistry. However, you do find some very beautiful flowers growing along.
I would pick them.
Okay. And are you going to go see your chemist and potential bride?
Yes.
Oh.
All right. And Lucian, you spend the next few days just kind of wandering the castle, but you're very distracted with everything going on and planning your next move. You do not get you do not get lost, but you're very just kind of anxious and lost in thought and don't find anything noteworthy. Gil, you head down to the Tebadron Castle dungeons. Sure enough, you see the familiar swirl of smoke coming from underneath the converted closet that functions as Summer's laboratory.
So this is on day 1.
Okay.
I'm going to put the flowers on the ground, knock, and then hide.
Hide.
Okay. Make me a stealth check. C stealth.
You forgot the C.
I forgot one.
No worries.
Yeah.
Man, the rolls are great tonight.
Yeah, without y'all's dice, man.
Gil, you leave the assortment of flowers, knock, and attempt to hide behind a nearby pillar. And as you hear the door open, you turn to, keep yourself hidden from view. And there's a pause. A moment passes, two, and you turn your head to see if they've gone back in or if they came out and saw the flowers. And you see her leaning against the pillars, staring at you, only an inch between your noses as you turn your head. She smiles and steps back, and you can see she has the very familiar blackened with soot and ash face with a very clear marking of where her goggles were over her eyes, but that are currently tied against her head. Hey, Gil, what's up?
I made it back.
Uh, he. I got a message from someone, so it confused me. She tilts her head and smiles with a raised eyebrow. Well, I should hope so. Where'd you go?
You can drop the axe. Your dad already filled us in.
She tilts her head.
Oh, repeat that.
She tilts her head to the side again. What do
Oh, the whole trading us over to the what kingdom are they again? The
Barbarous.
barbarous kingdom for your own skins, yada yada yada. Trying
You
to
see her.
knock me
You,
to sleep with that little letter of yours.
you see her pupils visibly dilate when you mention Barbarous, and she kind of takes a step back and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, first of all," and she holds up one finger. If I wanted to put you to sleep, I would know not to do that. You're an elf. You can't be knocked out with sleep. And secondly, what are you talking about? My family doesn't do deals with Barbarous. We're thieves, not monsters.
Yeah, I would ask your dad about that because he did, but now he's trying to weasel his way out of it. You know, thieves don't like being cornered. But hey, no hard feelings.
She kind of takes a step away from you and kind of looks you up and down and kind of narrows her eyes. And finally, after a moment, crosses her arms. Did you need something?
Just wanted to see how you were doing. Things may not have gone according to how I planned, but you're a very nice person. And he's going to stutter over that.
She raises an eyebrow and smirks a bit.
I would also like to leave a slight warning. Not to be mean, but maybe do not follow your father quite so blindly. You're smarter than that information.
She takes a deep breath, kind of puts her hands together before letting the breath out. I appreciate it, Gil, but it's not about trusting him or being smarter than him. And she lets the goggles fall back over her eyes, and it's difficult to see through the like smudges on the goggles, but you can see her just staring at you. And she says, but he's my father, and he takes care of me, and I take care of him. Whatever you're talking about, I'll ask him about it, but it's not your place to question the family.
Maybe not. I like making sure people are aware. But he also did say not to mention this. But I do want you to at least have some knowledge.
She rolls her eyes. I'm certainly not lacking in that.
Maybe not. And he's going to head off.
And
Strike.
as you leave, you hear the lab door begin to creak shut, and you just hear almost a whisper, but the tunnel carries it down to you. Thanks for the flowers. And the door shuts harshly.
And he's gonna smile and pray to the gods that she doesn't really say anything to her dad.
You shouldn't have said anything, Dora.
I was like,
He's an idiot.
Yes, he is.
He wants her to be prepared.
Hey, just so you know, your loving father who raised you from, because I believe you do know this, she is the only birth child of this family, so she's arguably the tightest with the king, and you basically just strolled in, said that like he's plotting behind your back, and then strolled back out.
oh yeah, your father's a monster. Walk away.
Bye.
She's seriously that surprised? He's a thief and a king. So he's not going to tell her everything.
In fairness, she is a teenager.
That's what I was trying to get across to her. She doesn't know everything her father does, to keep an eye on, to be aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, does anyone else have any business before the minimum period passes, and then you can choose to start heading to the ball?
I'd like to maybe go find a nice dress. I don't know what I can find in this town, but something nice to wear.
Make me an investigation check.
Well, I guess Gail will, maybe not a dress, but find some
Come on, that
pair of clothes.
Close.
My rolls are really bad tonight.
It's rough.
Yeah.
God, you got.
Yeah.
For those watching at home, almost nobody has rolled above a 10. There's been an 11.
Here we go.
I just rolled a 13.
Well,
My
your roll is 9.
Yeah, like the core, like the base rolls. Yeah.
Y'all have high modifiers,
so. Looking around Lucian, I'll say for the sake of brevity that the two of you go out around the same time, so just shopping trip. Good Lord, all of you! Zephyr is thankfully not very difficult for you. The family is having their outfits prepared, like in private, so you can just get set up with the others. They set you up with a somewhat lower quality compared to the other nobles, but because you're going in guise as a servant, tuxedo with room for your tail, and wear your cloak over it should you wish. And Summer offers you during the fitting to essentially work some chemical magic on you and the party in case you have need of disguises.
It's an interesting offer. It changes.
Well, she's making this offer to Zephyr, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, what was she offering again?
While you guys are being fitted for your outfits, like by the private, like royal fitters, she offers to essentially work some chemical magic on you and the party to sneak you in a bit easier via some chemistry.
Sure.
She gives you a smile and a wink. All right, I'll get you set up. Lucian, searching around, as you can probably imagine, it's a bit difficult to find formal wares in a place like this. However, while the two of you are shopping, Gil, it's kind of squirreled away, so you initially almost miss it, but you just managed to catch as you're going down the street the inside of a small hut of sorts with several very fine suits and dresses lining the walls.
Hey, Lucian, how?
It will have to do.
Okay. you go in and so again, shopping. So keeping it somewhat brief. A fine set of clothes will be 15 gold.
Okay.
Gil?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. And I will say, because like all this is just getting yourselves, all of you set up with fine clothes, I will let all of you essentially, like, you can flavor the outfits within reason. So, you can say what kind of outfit you're specifically going for.
I think that Lucian will want to wear like a emerald green dress. She doesn't want to look too flashy because she knows she's going to be like posing as a servant. So like
at least on
like,
entry.
Like a nice green dress, long sleeves, maybe like the type that like it goes down to the hand.
Okay.
Maybe a little glittery.
I really like those kind of dresses, actually. So very, very fashionable. I'm into it. Gil, how about you? You don't have
sweetheart neckline and
Okay, that's
like
a
a
little bit
slit.
too much detail.
No, it has to be in detail. Very sexy.
All right. And you don't have to specify, Gil, if you don't want to. Just like you have the option, for the record.
I was gonna say it's basically nice, fancy, not quite tight but loose fitting tuxedo with not a white shirt, but it's more like a ruby collared shirt.
Lucian's gonna actually smile at him for the first time ever and jokingly say, I think this is the first time I've seen you with a shirt.
And he's also gonna have his hair put up.
Would that
with,
count as armor?
Ribbon.
All right. So the two of you managed to put yourselves together pretty fancy like. Zephyr, do you have any particular wants or desires for your outfit?
No, I'll just accept whatever the family gives me. I'll be like, all right, cool, that works. Oh, it's got holes in it, sure, whatever.
They do set you up with a very nice suit. Okay. Eventually, once you guys have gotten your outfits, the day arrives, and there's not a whole lot of ceremony behind it. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that you were waiting for this time to, essentially get moving, you wouldn't have even really registered that anything notable was happening. But after a while, a servant on the morning of the third day, a servant alerts all of you one by one from your bedrooms that the king and the royal family is prepared to move whenever you see fit.
Well, I would say there's one other thing I wanted to do on my spare 2 days. I want to keep looking in the forest.
Okay.
I want to see if I can find more.
Make me 2 more survival checks.
I'm looking for.
Come on, good roll.
Hey!
Natural 20.
All right.
Here we go.
All right. We're finally out of the pit.
And I will message you what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Just curious on Sip's character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll get there, don't worry. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. You managed to find a lot of that. And you're pretty content with your haul. Like, with this and your previous haul, this would be enough for a dinner party. You're pretty confident.
Perfect.
All right. So, are you guys wanting to leave now, or do you have any other business, or do you just want to wait, or it's up to you?
I'm ready
should
to
we
go.
stay in these monkey outfits, or
We should probably put on traveling clothes and then put it on when we get there. Because you don't want to stink up your nice clothes.
Those clothes are not going to survive this campaign. That is almost a guarantee.
So he's gonna he's gonna have back on, and he's gonna be so comfortable. He's not wearing a shirt.
Quick
Not
question.
wearing a
Quick.
shirt.
Another thing about my dress is that I'm going to have a belt that has like a little loop where she can display her holy symbol.
All right.
Oh.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. Okay. So, Zephyr, I'm guessing you don't have any other errands and you're ready to leave as soon as possible?
Thinking about it. I don't think I have anything I want to do. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good.
All right. You guys put away your fancy outfits for now, adding them to your luggage. Gather your things. Lucian, you grab Pietro, who you notice has basically any time he's not been sleeping or otherwise occupied is keeping like armor on and mace at the ready, but hasn't like gotten into trouble or anything. And since
And she's telling him it suits him.
he just kind of smiles and blushes and fidgets. And seeing as he won't be attending the ball, he did not go for the fancy clothes shopping. So, sending word via the servant that you will be ready to travel with today. You guys head out to the town square where you see there's a minor commotion as, you know, the civilians seeing the royal family out and about. As you see a fairly acceptable but not overly extravagant set of carriages, two being pulled by very exotic looking draft animals. And you see the king and the queen already dressed to impress. You notice both of them are wearing what appear to be the Tibadran royal colors, a series of bright and colorful oranges, with a very simple and humbly made suit for the king, but a very lavish, glittering dress for the queen. And at their sides, wearing similarly fashionable outfits, are Summer, Loop, and another boy, human this time, that you have not recognized from your previous ventures in the city. So you presume they are likely the missing royal child from that was mentioned before. The king nods to you all as you step forward. About ready to head out?
Did you want us to try put on our fancy clothes too? It wasn't clear.
He smiles and waves a hand. You can change before we get there. Bit unconventional, but you're a very unconventional. I can't imagine we'll get into too much trouble. After all, we own crime on these highways.
And then Gil will head towards the first carriage, so he can because he wants to drive.
I am not getting on that cart.
You see the king kind of raises an eyebrow as you hop into the driver's seat, but shrugs and says, one less person to pay. And he kind of adjusts his pockets a bit before leaning on his cane and says, all right, and Summer. Zephyr, your sister, steps forward and looks over all of you, very pointedly looking away from the carriage. And once you guys are changed and set up, I can work some chemical magic. And she shakes a small purplish green vial over you to give you some disguises just to get through the gates. Won't last very long, but it should create as little suspicion as possible, if that works for you.
Will it change like how we look?
She kind of does like that kind of camera movement with the fingers over you and says, it'll change you physically. Your outfit won't change unless to match whatever I decide to make you look like. But don't worry, nothing will get damaged and you'll go back to normal shortly after.
Lucian just shrugs. All right.
She smiles. Trust me, it's been tested. Right, Zeffy?
guess.
Trust is something that runs short for me, but I can recognize your brilliance in what you do.
Thanks. And she kind of approaches you and slings an arm over your shoulder. And you notice she's kind of glancing around, but it's hard to tell what she's looking at before gesturing towards the carriage. Well, my lady, and she gives a very exaggerated bow. After you.
This is going to chuckle. All right, and she'll get in.
During this whole thing,
She
has
hops.
Summer looked even towards my direction at all?
Make a.
What?
He was checking to see if Summer was looking at him.
Hey,
Yeah, she was very pointedly like making it, basically checking that you were watching before being really friendly with Lucian. She hops into the carriage along with you, Lucian, and sits across from you. Zephyr, which seat would you like to take? There's the carriage Gil is driving, currently unoccupied, and the second one that is currently occupied by Summer and your sister.
Summer and my sister.
Oh, sorry, Lucian and your sister. My bad.
Summer and my
Thank
sister. Lucian,
Yeah,
my
slip
sister? Question
of the
mark.
Yeah, slip of the tongue. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's like the internet. The internet's a fucking genie. You slip on one thing.
What?
Yeah. So, mocking the DM aside, what would you like to do?
I guess I will get in the cart that Gil's in, or the Gil's driving.
Okay. So you.
What?
She's trying to say, hold on to whatever you can while he drives.
The king and the queen get in the cart with you, Zephyr, and Loop joins the second carriage, and as does the younger noble, Tibadran noble, sitting across from Loop, which would place them next to you, Lucian. And with that, some bandits kind of close in around the carriages, very threatening display before they simply shut the doors. And one hops up onto the carriage that does not currently have a driver. And you hear the king's voice call out from the first carriage. All right, to the summer ball. And the bandits all clap and cheer. And with a yeah from both Gil and the driver of the second carriage, they begin to move towards the Sprintwood, away from the city and towards the ball. So it'll take quite, as they've said, it is quite a trip. So does anyone have anything they'd like to do notably on?
Lucian would like to talk with Summer.
Okay. And yeah, okay, I was just making sure I'm keeping track of the party's position in my mind. Oh, and as a side note, because I just realized there's one person I forgot, Pietro is sitting in the first cart with Zephyr and the king and queen.
Oh.
Lucian is not happy with this.
I was like, oh.
Yeah, everyone else had already taken seats, so there wasn't room. Okay, so Summer's sitting directly across from you. So she's just kind of sitting, leaning back and crossing her legs, seeming pretty casual, and just kind of making small talk with the other two in the carriage. What would you like to say?
So, does it? I'm sure it happens quite often, like with Gil. I'm sure you have many suitors.
She's very quiet for a moment before eventually she shakes her head. No, actually, I don't leave the castle that much, as you can guess. And she kind of gestures to her very pale complexion. Not exactly the outdoorsy type when I'm not scavenging or harvesting. And even that I'm trying to work out how to do inside. So, and my father my dad's not exactly the type for arranged marriages and that sort of thing. So I've never had anyone like that in my life.
Lucian will gesture to her own, porcelain skin. Before this whole fiasco, I've never been out either. It's all this traveling is very new to me. And Gil is very interesting. He's kind of stupid, but I think he means well.
She kind of chuckles a bit, but leans back a bit. Means well, huh?
She's gonna shrug. You know, I noticed him, looking at you, and he was blushing really, really badly. It was kind of fun.
She smiles and kind of, and you notice the two boys in the carriage are kind of like leaning away and just trying to get into their own conversation as you two get into boy talk. But Summer leans forward, placing an elbow on her knee, and says, my dad showed me something kind of interesting.
Oh, really?
Uh, she places a hand to her chest, very, very clearly in a dramatic display, and recites Gil's letter of courtship.
Lucina's just gonna, laugh. Like, full on belly laugh. Wow. I knew that he really liked you, but that's kind of hilarious.
She gives a kind of small smile and says, "Yeah, yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't know if he's my type."
He's, I think he's all, muscle, but no muscle in the head,
She smirks and kind of leans against the side of the carriage and says, "Well, I suppose that's one thing we'd have going for us if anything happened. I can make up a bit for that deficiency, huh?"
Thank goodness for that. I mean, you are pretty smart. How old are you?
She blinks a bit, and a very strange expression crosses her, as if she's genuinely never been asked that before. And it almost seems like she has to think for a moment before 17. I'll be turning 18 not long after the ball.
Oh, you're quite young. I am 170.
Elves.
That's like 30 years in in human years.
She kind of smiles a bit and says, "Oh, what I wouldn't give for that elf lifespan."
I've got a long way to go. Elves can live for quite some time, and I think Gil is much older.
She raises an eyebrow and kind of tilts her head side to side for a bit before kind of glancing out the window. That's interesting. And she kind of smirks a little bit before leaning back with a smile. What do you do with all that extra time?
Personally, study. Um, I've done a lot of work in my time. Just like you, I like to find the best uh, option. I like to heal people, and I like to be around people, and it's really interesting being around. You know, for so long, you get to watch history instead of reading about it.
She's watching you with a very interested expression and kind of running her fingers down her leg, almost as if she's like just kind of trying to keep her fingers occupied while she thinks, before finally just saying in a very kind of distant tone, "Not what I was expecting."
And what do you do with the extra time?
She goes quiet, uh, and after a moment, never thought about it. I guess. I guess if I had the option, I'd like to perfect my craft see what things I can do with chemicals. And if that goes well for me, then who knows? Maybe I can get out of the castle a bit more and see about settling down and living a normal life. I'll be honest, I'm not super interested in this sort of thing. And she gestures to the kind of fancy carriage and the clothes. But
Honestly, I like it. I mean, I've been around nobles since I was, a little girl, and my mom was a lady. She was from noble blood, so it just comes naturally for me. I can't really imagine anything else or living anywhere else. It's like I said, this whole traveling and being in new places is very foreign to me. Like I've never met any mother or even the president or anything. Like I've heard of them, of course, and I've read about it, and you
meeting
know
them something different.
yeah, it's way different. It's
Uh,
foreign, no?
she smiles and leans back a bit and says, I'll admit Dad's kept me a bit sheltered from it all. I don't think he really knows what he's supposed to be doing when it comes to, raising a princess, but I know that it's something expected of me, so similar to you, I do some book learning when I can. I at least know how to curtsy properly, which spoon to use at the dinner table, and what not to say to big headed nobles who think it's their place to question your family.
Lucy's gonna chuckle. So he came to you then.
She kind of sighs and kind of gets a sad smile. Was it that obvious?
Little bit. Was he harsh with you?
She is silent for a moment, and you see her fingers kind of tense a bit. And finally, she says, My father, my dad, he's a complicated person, but not a bad one. He takes care of all of us. I know Zephy is a bit odd, and all of us are, I suppose, but it's not his place.
Lucian will not. I agree, actually. I mean, I may not have agreed with what had happened and what occurred, and but he was honestly just looking out for his family, and it's it's complicated, really. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you that it was an unpleasant exchange, but I'm not going to tell you what is or isn't right. That's not for me to do.
Uh, she smiles and leans back and kind of relaxes a bit, but you see her kind of glance to the two boys in the carriage and kind of gives you a sly wink and says, I suppose we can talk a bit more about that later. I did talk to Dad about it a little bit, and for what it's worth, I genuinely had no idea. If I had, I would have told him how to do it better.
Going to turn her head and look at, because you said Loop and the other the new person who we
Mhm.
haven't met isn't there, and she's gonna turn
Yeah,
to
and then
him.
they're currently just exchanging conversation.
What is your name?
The young boy turns to you, seeming kind of startled a bit from being directly addressed. Now that you're taking a good look at him, you see that this is a very young human boy with about shoulder length blonde hair, that very bright blonde. That kind of curls slightly at the end, and currently is kind of done up in a very comfortable but like still clearly meant to be fancy. And you can see he's kind of like tugging at the collar of it a bit. Suit. Um, he has a very slight and lithe frame to him, and his suit, unlike the others, where they have purely the Tabadran oranges, has some white at collar and tips of it as kind of an outlining color. And he kind of startles a bit as you address him before giving you a polite bow of the head. Oh, Caleb. My name is Caleb.
Miss Lucian. And she's gonna look at Summer. Which, by the way, shouldn't we have like fake names?
Fake names.
She gives a smile and says, Dad's getting old. Things like that slip his mind. You can come up with something if you want. How about pseudonym?
Pseudo?
She kind of points at you, like seeing if you get the joke.
I actually really like that.
She smiles. Use it. See if the nobles notice.
Fine, but maybe if I say it in a like a maybe joking way, like maybe my father was stupid.
Okay.
She kind of puts the fist over her mouth and chuckles. And the kind of now being drawn into the conversation, the boys in the carriage laugh as well.
I mean, nothing to say of my real father, but I mean, come on.
Summer kind of leans back and says, well, if you do try that, you'll have to tell me how it goes. I would love if you managed to use that to someone's face and they didn't notice.
I'm going to try, I promise you.
She smiles and starts just kind of fiddling with the small vials of the chemical that she had shown you for disguising use, as if just kind of doing a quick check over them, making sure that they have the proper properties they need. And she looks to you and says, I've been meaning to ask you, the kid, the one that you've been kind of babysitting around the castle, are you his?
No, I'm not his mother. Not biologically speaking. I have never been in love. You know, I feel responsible for him. I do care for him very deeply. I feel like I have a connection with him. Does that make sense?
You see her kind of look down, and you kind of realize that like someone so isolated and growing up on presumptions of nobility and further isolated by their intelligence and trying to maintain it, she doesn't. She has no idea what you mean. And the younger boy, Caleb, just kind of looks at you and tilts his head, not seeming totally alien to what you're talking about, but just being too young to really understand. But you see Loop just nod his head silently.
Let me put it this way. You know, Zephyr is your brother, but not by blood. But you still care for him. It's kind of like that.
She kind of you see Caleb kind of nod, kind of understanding, but Summer kind of tilts her head to the side and says, and what if something happened between the two of you?
You mean like a fight?
Yeah, or like things got in the way.
I think it would make me very sad. I don't really think it ever occurred to me that something would ever happen. I mean, I care about him so much, more so than my real brother.
The two boys nod, but Summer just kind of stares at you before looking to the floor, seeming very, very depressed and I just I just don't think I've ever had anything like that.
She's gonna reach over and try to touch her arm. If you would like, we can be friends.
She kind of looks up to you and kind of stares at you for a moment, and you can see just she very much takes after her father, and you can see that same a constant calculation going on behind the eyes before finally she smiles and says, yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay, from now on, we are going to be really good friends. Maybe someday we could even be best friends. I think I'd like that.
She smiles and says, "Yeah." And she kind of seems a bit brighter and kind of leans back and settles into her seat. Uh, and kind of uncrosses her legs and kind of fidgets a bit. Like now she's like not really sure how to conduct herself around someone who's.
She's gonna add. She's gonna add. Besides, who else am I going to talk about? How stupid Gil is.
She leans forward. "Oh my God, let me tell you." And you see both of the boys in the carriage kind of roll their eyes. And with that, we'll cut away.
Okay.
Zephyr and Gil up in the first cart. Do either of the two of you have anything notable before arriving at your first stop?
The only thing I'm really doing is keeping an eye on the woods, making sure that we're not being followed by people we're not supposed to be.
Make me a perception check.
And it starts.
You do see the usual variety of Tabadran bandits just monitoring you from the trees, but they didn't bother you when you had the prince with you, and they're certainly not going to bother you with the king.
Do
So
I see Q?
not here, but you can look for him once you start getting to Fuse. On that note, as there's a very large group of you and you have a very long trip ahead of you, I'm not going to make you roll for perception every night. So for the sake of keeping it manageable, all three of you, please make me perception checks.
Oh. Perception.
You said perception, right?
All right, natural one.
Oof. Bad start.
Hey,
That's something.
a 23 is not bad.
All right. Okay. Zephyr, traveling in a royal entourage and along with your family, you feel perfectly relaxed, especially because you know this is your family's turf. So you just relaxed. You're content. Gil and Lucian, you keep a careful eye on the tree line, but you do not see anything of overt note. However, Gil, you notice as you exit the Sprintwood that you had gotten used to seeing the kind of constant, like, slight activity of bandits in the tree line, kind of keeping pace with you and keeping an eye on you. That, as this is their territory, it's their job to monitor movement. You do notice, though, as you leave the Sprintwood officially out of Tabadran territory, the back carriage is now being followed by Q and a small group of about 6 or 7 bandits backing him, all armed and just not aggressively, just following behind. And as the movement starts to head from the Sprintwood into the Tieshan Valley, they kind of circle the back carriage and just kind of start monitoring the surroundings. And as you kind of look back, Q kind of gives you a smirk and a nod.
I'll nod back. Happy that he's here. I like this guy. I should probably question who I like on this point.
All right. So, eventually, after a couple days, you do approach the city of Perha, the familiar walls overlooking the valley, and the carriages are pulled to a stop. And Lucian, because you had told the king this is where you wanted to drop off your son, you see Pietro stepping out with the king, kind of not shoving him, just kind of ushering him slightly with his cane. And as you step into view, he kind of leans forwards, sitting next to Zephyr in the carriage, and says, "Is this the right place?"
Yes, this is right. Hi, I'm sure you know where to go from here. Do you can go home? deliver the letter first.
He gives a nod and kind of looks around a bit nervously, and the king leans forward a bit and kind of nods as well to get your attention. And don't worry, on the way here, we had a bit of a talk, and I may or may not give an early indication of possibly, maybe joining the alliance if it suits me. And he kind of waves his hand back and forth as he talks, but you can see him kind of smiling with his eyes glittering. And while you do recognize it as the glint of opportunity, it does actually slightly comfort you. And Pietro gives a nod and says, yes, the president will be happy to know that the Tibadrians might be on our side, maybe.
It's a maybe, queen or president.
She usually goes by queen just because it sounds better.
Yeah, it's just like after all these days, like maybe.
Like you tell the president the good news, and then tell your dad that I told you that you were a good boy.
He nods slowly and says, "I will." And he kind of
a big hug and
and
forehead.
he actually was already rushing to do the same. So you two just kind of collide with each other and tightly embraced. He kind of steps back and fidgets a bit and kind of adjusts his satchel as if double checking the contents and says, "You and all the others, make sure to stay safe, okay? It's not them I'm worried about. It's everything else."
You should be worried for the other people. She's gonna give him a wink.
He kind of giggles a bit and kind of turns and almost does like a complete 360 in place before grabbing you in another hug and scurrying off towards the gates.
What a good boy.
Yeah.
She'll go back into her into the carriage with Summer.
Okay. Summer just kind of smiles at you, and you see Loop just kind of sitting back with a content smile, and Caleb was just watching the whole event play out like in rapture. All right, so with that, the journey begins towards your destination. So again, this will be the last stretch of travel before you arrive at your destination. Is there anything you guys would like to do of note before you arrive?
Well, when we stop for the night, Gil is once again going to go look for more supplies.
All right, survival check. All right, you managed to find another respectable handful of supplies. All right, so you guys travel for another several days, making small talk with your caravan, or rather carriage's occupants. And eventually, you guys begin to notice, you don't notice the view outside changing first. What you notice, all of your noses kind of instinctually scrunching a bit. You notice the air goes from the very clean and mellow, pleasant smells of the Sprintwood and the Tieshan Valley to a very, not like horrendous or toxic, but just a very unpleasant, muggy smell, and your skin immediately begins to feel kind of moist and uncomfortable. And as you look out the window, you notice what had previously been very nice, simple pine trees and the like for the Sprintwood are now beginning to darken and droop, and the bark is turning this more rounded and ruddy looking texture and color to it, giving way to willow and more drooping, depressed-looking foliage, frankly. And the carriages come to a stop as the sun begins to set. And the king and the royals are beginning to gather. And as all of you step out, the king grins to all of you and says, "All right, we'll be arriving shortly. But have any of you ever been to this part of the woods before?"
I probably have.
Make a history check.
I don't think so.
May I?
By all means.
I'm just gonna say no, because
It's a dirty 20.
Okay.
24.
Lucky.
Wow. Rude. All right, just a moment. Gotta pull up my. There we go. Okay. Fittingly enough, Lucian, you have not been here before, but you have heard of it. And Gil, you have been here, or rather, you have not actively traveled here on your own, but your family has been through here before, through previous campaigns and marches that took you through this area. Both of you know that this is the Summer Sea Forest, a stretch of dark forest and marshland that is occupied by the Humor Empire. And you recognize now that the smell hitting you is the just stagnant swamp water smell.
Lovely.
The king gives a grin and says, to keep things neutral and fair, we have to give every empire a chance to play host, even if it means sweating and vomiting the tuxedos off. And he kind of twitches and tugs at his collar. And you notice like the royal children especially getting kind of fidgety. And he says, "All right, we're going to be arriving shortly. We'll give you all a chance to get dressed. And he kind of does a hand over his face. Before we get to the gates, Zephyr, are you still good to do your job?"
I believe so. Is there anything that I would be carrying?
I passed my
he gestures
sword
to
and
Gil.
my longbow.
Your what?
Great sword and longbow.
Oh, okay.
I pass him my shield and my long sword. And I think that's it.
And then Gil also wants to talk to the king before they enter. Because he has an idea he wants to run by him.
All right. Well, do you want to do it here or just before?
Well, privately.
Okay. So you kind of, as the rest of the royals start to head back to the carriage, he kind of raises an eyebrow at you, but shrugs and says, "Very well, just a moment. Zephyr, whenever we arrive, this is where you're taking it." And he hands you a piece of parchment and says, "Shouldn't be too hard to find. Just ask around before Summer's Potion Wear."
Alrighty then.
I've already sent ahead for rooms to be reserved. All you need to do is tell them our names. And he smiles and says, "Not," and he gestures to Gil standing right there. "I mean," and he gestures between the two of you, "our names." And he waves a hand to make sure, especially the three of you are paying attention. "Remember, your cover story is that you are servants accompanying the Tibadran royal family. You are allowed to do as you please once we're inside, but until we get in, I'm going to need you to behave yourself. I'll try not to have too much fun at your expense."
Lucian must be
Any
happy
last
about
business
this.
before we get?
Well, I did have slight plan I wanted to run by you.
He nods. Of course, of course. Just want to make sure your friends have a chance to speak. So, Lucian and Zephyr, anything you want to cover before?
Lucian will just get dressed and make yourself look presentable.
So what did y'all give me?
I'm also gonna give you my 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 holy symbol, just in case I'm not allowed to like
Have it.
be presenting it out.
Okay. All right. So, Zephyr, you now have a collection of the party's personal trinkets and armaments.
Trying to see if I can carry all this.
I won't take carrying capacity too strictly, especially if you're only just barely over it. Yeah. So, with that, the king nods, and as the two of you head off to get Zephyr to make sure you can carry everything, and Lucian to get dressed, the king turns to you, Gil, as the two of you are now alone. Yes.
So I have, over the last week, been collecting many different types of poisons and nightlock, which I was considering
He nods. I'm aware.
using on the Scar Confederacy, whatever they're calling themselves.
The Scar Concord.
Yes. Do you think it would kill them? And since that's our end goal to kill them, would it be wise to wipe them all at once?
He raises a hand and says, ordinarily, I would agree with you, but if it was that simple, I would have done it myself. First of all, remember, while we don't know the full extent of it, or at least I don't, I'm sure they have defenses against such a basic attempt at assassination. Secondly, this is not going to be everyone. You could poison everyone at the party willy-nilly, but that's going to take a good deal of innocent nobles with them, people you might know and possibly care about if there's a heart beating in there somewhere, and he kind of jabs you a bit in the chest. And third, even if we did know all of them, all we have is my word that they were up to no good. And he kind of raised an eyebrow. Do you think my word is going to be enough to stop a potential continental war when word gets out that half the royals in the kingdom drop dead overnight?
It's Swampland. What do you expect?
He smirks and says, well, at the very least, the humor would have that to look forward to. And he shrugs. I won't stop you, but I wouldn't recommend. And I'll be certain not to eat what I can avoid.
He will. Well, since he said he doesn't think it's going to work out too well, Gil will inform him that he'll give it all to Summer to hold on to.
He raises his eyebrows and smiles and says, I'm sure she'll appreciate that.
Probably.
All right. So do you pass them along to Summer?
I do.
She kind of raises her eyebrows at just the sheer stock that you've collected before smiling and taking them. And she kind of stares at you for a moment before smiling slightly. Thanks.
You're welcome. And then he'll go get dressed. And then I've already got hiding places for my daggers.
Mm-hmm. All right. She kind of watches you go before smiling a bit and heading inside the carriage, already gussied up herself. Zephyr, you flip over the piece of parchment, and it only contains one word. North? Nortwicks.
Oh, Northwicks. Do I know what that means?
You can ask the king. He's the one who handed it to you.
I mean, I guess I will ask him. The more information I can get to start, the better.
All right, so you approach him as Gil's walking away.
So where exactly am I taking these stuff?
He nods to the parchment in your hand. That is the name of a tavern where I've managed to reserve you all some beds and food for the next several days while the ball's taking place. They'll make sure your stuff is looked after and safely within reach. And he tilts his head and smiles and says, they don't usually work with our type, but you know what they say, money.
And how do you have a plan on me getting inside with these weapons?
He smirks and says, this sort of information is private to members of the Scar Concord, but there is a less ceremonial entryway into the city reserved for those that humor has business with. And he kind of brings you in for like a one-armed hug, but you're used to this being his routine to whisper information to you, and says, at the gates, there's a river. Go to the right, you'll find a tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the river, and you're sure not to miss it.
Alrighty then.
If there's any guards, just tell them your name. Again, and he gestures between the two of you.
Oh, you're saying our last name and all that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because connections.
Yeah.
And with that, he pulls out of the hug and kind of tousles your head a bit and smiles. Well, if there'll be nothing else.
I think I can handle it from here.
I'm sure you can. You're the best at what you do. Good luck, Zephyr.
Alright.
All right. So you guys get into your formal wear, and Summer distributes to each of you a small, very almost tiny vial, and explains. So take this whenever we're about to get to the gates. It'll disguise your appearance for 5 minutes. That's all we need to get through the.
Okay.
Alright.
And I will actually hand it to me, whisper, it did keep these away from the other stuff I gave you, right?
She kind of tilts her head and says, you're going to have to drink it to find out, Gil. And she taps you on the nose and trails her finger down to your lips before pulling away. It's just one drop. It couldn't hurt.
He's going to blush so much.
Lucian's just gonna try to hide her smile.
She smirks and pulls her normally very long hair up into a bun and kind of locks it in place and kind of wriggles herself a bit before sighing. Hate all this hoity-toity nonsense. All right, let's make this quick, Dad. And the king kind of smirks, also kind of looking a bit uncomfortable in his formal wear. It's just for ceremony, Summer. All right, let's go. And he taps the barrel of his cane against the carriage.
And Gil will again.
While in the carriage, Lucian is going to ask Summer if maybe she can like play with her hair a little bit and like help her look like nicer. Like she's already really pretty. I just want to help a little bit.
Already girlfriends. She smiles and pulls her hair out of the bun. Knock yourself out. I'm terrible at this stuff.
So she'll make her look really pretty. Maybe like do like a side braid. Make it look really nice.
I'll say make me a charisma check. Just a general charisma check. See how you do.
It's okay.
You manage to contain her typically very wild hair, and she looks pretty nice, and her hair complements her dress nicely. Look out, Gil, you got competition.
Yeah. I'm still your girl.
All right. So, with that, the carriages set off through Summersea Forest and towards the city of Mercurial. Eventually, you guys can look out the carriage windows and see that you're beginning the smell begins to get stronger, and you can tell that you're getting, it's no longer just the stagnant swamp water. You're now definitely getting into not necessarily the most hygienic of locations, and several unpleasant smells reach your nose as the carriages begin to just slog through the muck of the path you're traveling down. And the king turns to you, Zephyr, and says, "Now's your chance."
So I guess I'm walking from now on.
All right. So do you want to leave?
I guess I'll go towards the river and wherever the river is.
Okay. So as you step out and the other two, you glance out. Well, Lucian glances out the window. Gil, you're driving, so you can see it. So all of you now kind of get an unobstructed view of the city of Mercurial. You see that the land in front of you is dotted with kind of unsettling in the now glittering night in the swamp, campfires. And all of you kind of instinctively like lurch a bit in place as you see sitting around the campfire are not humans or elves or anything you'd expect. You see giants and ogres sitting around campfires and spit roasting several difficult to make out from this distance meats. And Zephyr, your attention is drawn to a palisade separating these tents and huts from a very bustling looking city on the other side of a towering set of walls. And in front of, between the palisade and the walls, you see a drawbridge that is currently lowered, giving you a small peek into the city within, and a river flowing under said drawbridge. So between you and the river is the village of ogres and giants.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty then.
The carriages begin to trundle their way. What do you do?
Are we close to the gates?
Yes. Like the carriages are heading to the gates. I'm just asking what Zephyr wants to do.
Yeah, because
all of you can of course do something.
Zephyr is going to be sneaky boy and stuff. I guess he's just gonna kind of go towards his destination that he was told of.
Okay. If you want to sneak, make me a stealth check. While he's doing that, what are the rest of you doing?
We get closer to the.
A little bit closer to the gates. I want to take my little potion. Pray she didn't poison me.
Okay.
Lucian will just drink it. She's not scared.
The two of you immediately, it doesn't hurt, but you feel the taste is awful. It is genuinely one of the most disgusting things you've ever tasted, and you're immediately almost nauseous, but you can feel a almost slight rubbing sensation on a lot of your exposed skin. And you cannot.
Polyjuice potion. It's a polyjuice potion.
Oh yeah, it is a potion of disguise. You cannot get a look at yourselves for obvious reasons, but Lucian, Summer sitting across from you, kind of leans back and smirks as the change takes hold and puts a hand to her chin. Not bad, not bad.
What
and you
have I
see
turned into?
she gestures to Loop, who kind of rifles through his pockets before handing her a small mirror, and Summer holds the mirror up to you. You see that you have turned into a very male, noticeably very buff and muscular half-orc.
Okay. Looking good.
She smiles and says, "I do what I can." And you see Caleb is immediately just kind of almost slightly poking at you as if to see how thorough the disguise is. And it seems thorough, almost as if you have genuinely physically changed for this brief time.
Nice. Maybe didn't it?
One more time.
She's jokingly saying to Summer, maybe next time put some mint in that potion.
She smiles and says, "Yeah, I could never really work the taste problem out." And hey, you had to take a drop. When I was testing it, I had to drink bottles of the stuff.
Ugh. I do not
She
envy
smiles and
my
shrugs.
friend.
She kind of chuckles. Well, after a while, taste becomes irrelevant to science.
She's gonna laugh.
Zephyr, what are you doing? You're sneaking. So, or did you already make your stealth check, or
I did.
how'd you do?
I don't like the way you said that.
Yeah, it's not good.
That
7.
sounds,
Okay. It's difficult for you to, you try to kind of skirt the outside, but this is a fairly sizable village, and you realize you're going to lose a lot of time if you try to go all the way around. So you start trying to work your way through. But there's nowhere you can really shadow yourself when the campfire lights are kind of constantly bouncing off of each other. And eventually, as you're passing between a very narrow bit where the two firelights don't quite seem to meet, about halfway across the village, you hear a kind of lumbering voice. Hey.
I guess I look towards this lumbering voice.
You see a very large giant with a few other giants and an ogre sitting around a campfire. And they're all kind of looking at you. And the giant stares at you and it's kind of, "What are you doing?"
I am walking.
He kind of stands up to especially compared to you, kind of intimidating height, and kind of steps over to you. Not necessarily looking threatening, more looking curious, and kind of kneels down to get a better look. He seems very, eyesight is a big problem for him. Never seen something like you.
Well, now that you see me, is there something you want from me?
He kind of narrows his eyes and glances to the stuff you're carrying. Where are you going?
I'm going to deliver some stuff to some friends.
His eyes squint a bit further. What friends?
Well, I wouldn't really call them friends, but more of a acquaintance, but I don't even know if I would go that far.
Who are the not?
Curious, are these like guard, or do these guys look like guards or something like that?
They just look like civilians. They're not really armed or anything.
Oh. Well, as much as I would love to tell you all of my doings, I would appreciate if you would let me continue my delivery.
He kind of stares at you. And do you just start to walk away?
I mean, depends on how long is he staring at me.
He's just kind of watching you. Doesn't really make any moves.
Well, if he basically doesn't do anything for a while, he'll just be like, "Well, if there's nothing more you need, I will be on my way."
What do you taste like?
Well, I haven't really particularly tasted myself, so I don't know.
And he kind of watches you before mucking his way back over to the campfire and sits down, and all of his friends, him and his friends, just kind of watch you as you walk away.
All right.
Making your way through the village, you notice a few of the villagers kind of glance at you as you pass, but nobody else really gives you much trouble. And eventually, you arrive at the river as your uh, uh, carriage escort of sorts begin to arrive at the gates. What do you want to do?
Next.
I mean,
Trying out my new muscles.
Everyone in the carriage is very impressed.
Zephyr's just gonna go towards this river that he heard so much about.
Okay. So make me a perception check. I'll give you advantage since you know what you're looking. Do you have dark vision?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, make me a perception check with advantage.
All right, Ethan. I have decent of that. Oof. Luckily, I have it. You gave me advantage.
Yeah,
So,
since you
not
already know what you're
much,
looking
not
for.
much better, but 13.
Okay. You trek through some very thick underbrush. It looks like this area isn't exactly tended, and you occasionally step into like a puddle or a mud pit, and your feet kind of get stuck, and you have to pull them out. And you have a very kind of almost jump scare of sorts as you are walking between two trees, and you hear a kind of, and you kind of immediately jump to the side as a snake kind of jumps at you, but you kind of pull back and just kind of glare at it before continuing on your way. And eventually, you follow the river as it flows towards the right, and you arrive at. It's not a coastal cliff, but it's a pretty sizable cliff that where the water from the river pours off into a lake you can see below. But glancing to your left, you see the walls are just for a moment broken by what appear to be a sewer tunnel, currently gated, where water and refuse flow into the river, but then immediately off into the lake.
So there's a gate, or there's a barred up entrance, basically.
Yeah, like you can see a lock, but yes, across the river you can see just near the cliff edge a gated sewer tunnel.
I guess I will go towards this gated this tunnel.
Okay. You see movement in the water as you approach. Before the metal clangs as a figure leaps out of the water and grips it with giant meaty fists, and there's a metallic as like something heavy bangs. And for a moment, we're going to cut to what the others are doing. While Zephyr was jungle trekking, Gil, being up front, you pass between the palisades, a break in them to allow travel through the pathway, and you see standing atop the walls are ogres wielding very hefty looking slings with almost boulders as ammunition, and standing on either side of the opposite bank over the river, which currently has a drawbridge for you to be able to cross, two giants, not wearing armor, but they're wearing very thick looking, almost centurion like helmets, and wielding, they don't appear to be clubs. It looks almost like they just broke pieces of a building and are just wielding it until it falls apart. and as the carriage approaches, one of them holds up their large meaty fist.
I will stop as requested.
The other one pulls a large slab of wood that looks like it was just ripped straight off of a tree, and you can see some parchment over it, and begins to make his way over to the first carriage. And he opens it, and you can hear the voice of the king behind you. The Tebadran royals and servants here for the summer ball. And you see the giant kind of look at the list in his hand and shuts the door very roughly. And I keep getting your names mixed up for some reason. Lucian. You hear heading towards your carriage now. The doors swung open by the list carrying centurion helmet donned giant who kneels down to look into the carriage and squint.
Lucian is just gonna look at Summer and try to be manly.
You see the giant kind of smiles a bit at you, kind of a toothy grin, and kind of squints to Summer, who, for her part, is maintaining her composure. You can see Luke doesn't look nervous, but is kind of, just holding himself together. And Caleb outright is looking like kind of unsettled. But Summer, with her hands over her lap, just says, "The royal family of Tebadra and their servants here for the summer ball." And the giant kind of glances at the list and squints back to you, Lucian, and looks to Summer. "I don't remember servants on the list." And Summer quirks an eyebrow and tilts her head to him, looking for all the part, like what you're used to seeing, Lucian, of like irritated nobles not getting what they want. And she crosses her legs and places a hand on her cheek and says, "Oh, well, I suppose we'll just have to take it up with father that you denied us our servants." And you see the giant kind of visibly flinch a bit, and kind of pouts and kicks his feet a little bit for, "Okay." And he scans you a bit, almost as if to double check you for any armaments, before slamming the carriage door shut, and gives a wave to his buddy, who nods and steps aside with a nod to you, Gil. "Go in."
Thank you. And we'll restart the carriage.
Okay. Zephyr. You're the opposite side of the gate. You see a almost pygmy-looking ogre, covered in muck and refuse, very foul-smelling, and very tiny for an ogre, like I said, clutching the bars of the gate and growling at you with an almost animalistic fury. And he just stares at you. "Who are you?"
I am on an errand.
"What is your business?"
My business is to travel through this tunnel.
He kind of rattles the bars of the gate a bit. "Who are you?"
Guessing. I'm gonna assume he's the guard that father talked about. So he's just gonna be like, "I am with the Tebadra. I'm with the Tebadra. They have asked me to travel this way, so I am doing my best to oblige them."
He squints and kind of steps back a bit from the gate and looks you up and down, and says, "Who are you delivering to?"
I am delivering to. I think here. I am making a delivery as part of my orders.
And he kind of like steps towards the gate again. Whose orders?
As I mentioned before, the debaters have told me to go through this entrance for something important.
He kind of loosens a bit and steps back and kind of looks you up and down. Make me a persuasion check with advantage. Because you didn't give him all the information he was asking for, but you did give him something.
Yeah, persuasion.
Yeah, persuasion with advantage.
Yeah, hopefully it's good because I don't have a high modifier. That's pretty good. And advantage. All right, advantage didn't help. 15.
He stares at you before giving a slow nod and reaches into the muck and pulls free a set of keys that he promptly opens the lock with and lets them just swing open with a and steps aside and waves with one hand. And you can see that he actually is wearing a very fine set of suit pants that are now thoroughly ruined. And says, "Make your delivery."
I appreciate that, and I guess I'm going to walk into the tunnel.
As soon as you're through the tunnel, he slams the gate shut and locks it, and you can see him kind of watching you before, as you're starting to turn a corner through the tunnel, dives back into the refuse and disappears. You walk through a very labyrinthine set of sewer tunnels, but as you approach a crossroads, you see a ladder going up, and you can see.
I guess I will. I guess I will travel up the ladder.
Okay. You travel up the ladder, and you push aside not like welded in, but just kind of applied grate covering, just bars essentially, and pull yourself up to find a, thankfully, not super crowded city street on the inside of Mercuriald.
I struggle with the gate.
And huh?
I said I struggle with that gate.
Yeah. And now that all of you, as the carriages pull in, are in the city, I will now describe the city. You find yourself in a sprawling and fairly nice metropolis. The buildings are all formed out of clay and mud from the swamp, and covered with a baked clay and mud tile roofing. You can see several lights of houses that are occupied, and just it's this sprawling and fairly nice, all things considered, city. The smell of the swamp and the ogre and giant village are blown away by the smell of spices, exotic and nice, like cinnamon and other like very nice smells that almost act as like a barrier against the smelly outskirts of the city. And you find sprawling streets before you of houses and businesses that are all currently ablaze with activity. As in the distance, you can see a very nice, extravagant palace on a high hilltop overlooking the city, and presumably where the summer ball is going to be taking place. As the carriages begin to make their way, Zephyr, make me a perception check.
Perception, yeah. Ooh, I'm not very good at perception today. 11.
All right. You look around and find the place you're looking for, Nortwick's. But you do see some passing ogres and giants that you could ask if you wish. So do you want to ask for directions?
So I didn't find it.
Yeah, just looking around, you didn't find it, but it's a big city.
Yeah.
So do you want to ask?
All right. yeah, I'll ask. I'll kind of. Well, is there what can I see where I'm at right now?
You are currently in a kind of mid part of the city, like almost perfectly in the middle. And the buildings around you look a bit more. I don't want to say extravagant, but they look a bit more high class than the ones you can see further down the hill. And in the distance, you can see several markets, like giants, ogres, and you can even see some orcs trading food and spices and other exotic materials. It overall seems like the market attracts a lot of attention. So the street you're on doesn't, and the streets you can see nearby aren't super crowded unless people have business.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are just kind of going to do what they need to do and not stopping for chit chat.
I guess I will. Yeah, I will ask. I will ask for directions.
Okay. You ask around at the market, and one of the orcs points you not too far from where you had come out, just a couple blocks down. And as you follow the directions you were given, you see a tavern, 2 stories. That already you can hear music and chatter inside. It sounds like it's quite a blaze with activity at the moment. Presumably, people staying here, traveling for the ball, similar to you. And you can see the sign above, Norwich. Do you wish to enter?
Well, I'm gonna assume that they're already here, which or something like that. I'm gonna go inside. The only way I can find out if they're here or not.
Okay. You enter, and you see a variety of orcs and giants and ogres hunched over tables that are sized for them, but like the building itself quite isn't. But they seem comfortable and having fun, and your nose is immediately hit with just this powerful mixture of like spices, both just kind of local, and you can see several of the giants and orcs are smoking a very like strong smelling substance, and your eyes almost start to water as that smell mixes with smells from the kitchen, and the whole place is just ablaze with conversation, and like the ground occasionally shakes when like a giant heard a good joke and slams his fist on the ground, and through almost dancing through the din, you see a figure playing music for the entertainment of those in the tavern. Would our guest Snips please describe your character?
Hello. So she is a small 2'11" goblin who is in a very well worn, well patched tunic and trousers and boots with a small fur cap on her head. And she sits atop a table with her legs crossed and a penny whistle to her lips as she plays music. Her eyes are yellow, her hair is dark brown, pulled back into a tight bun underneath the hat, and her skin is more of a gray green than the dark green most people usually imagine when thinking of a goblin. And I think that's about it.
Okay. So as you're playing music for the entertainment of the various giant folk of the tavern that frequent this place, as the door opens, and you're used to just at the moment the door opens turning and immediately like gathering attention, encouraging them to stay, you see a kobold enter. Not the kind of kobold you're used to seeing, though. You see this red-skinned canid lizard, currently donned in a very nice suit, with a cloak kind of thrown over it, and carrying slung over their back a lot of weapons and equipment that seem a bit too big for them. You get the impression they might be just like a merchant or something from just the size of the luggage they're carrying that they themselves are incapable of using. And they kind of look around not necessarily seeming lost, but more like they're looking for something.
Hello, welcome to Northwix. I'll be with you in just a moment.
Alright, then I guess I will sit at a bar waiting for service.
The moment you sit at the bar, you feel a glass fly into your hand, and a elvish figure almost practically dances into your line of sight. You see this tall elvish man with very long, beautiful hair, kind of looking you up and down with an amused smile, and says, "So what can I help you with?"
I am here on business.
And he kind of gives a kind of pouty frown and leans forward. How about a little bit of pleasure first, huh? And he kind of taps the counter, and you see the glass begin to.
What?
You cut out.
You cut out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, he says, "How about a bit of pleasure first?" And he taps his fingers on the counter, and your glass begins to.
He's going to push away the glass and be like, well, I appreciate it, but I'm not here on pleasure. I'm more or less waiting for a group.
He kind of tilts his head to the side and seems kind of interested, kind of his eyes darting up and down before he kind of leans forward a bit and says, "Well, can I get a name at least?"
Should I give him the name? I'm here for Tabeja.
You see the figure raise his eyebrows and lean back and kind of slap his hand to his forehead in a very exaggerated gesture of shock, and says, "Oh, why didn't you say so? We already have your rooms reserved. I'm assuming you're here to drop off your things."
Yes, I am.
He smiles and says, "Very well. Raccoon,
Yes, Lorcan?
would you put Tebedra to his room?"
Sure, which one is that?
He reaches behind the counter and throws you a ring of keys. And Zephyr, you notice as the keys are kind of flying into the goblin's hands, that each key is not branded, but almost delicately painted on, has the Tebedran royal symbol. And he says, "Upstairs, back 3 rooms to the right."
Oh, it's that one. Okay.
He smiles and says, "Go get him, slugger." And he nods to the patrons of the bar. "I'll keep him occupied." And he slides over the bar and kind of cracks his neck a bit and starts getting ready to perform in your place.
Raccoon kind of just sticks her tongue out at him as he kind of moves away.
All right. So, do you take the kobold up to his room?
Yep. She goes, "It's right this way. It's not a long walk. You shouldn't have to carry that for very much longer."
I will definitely be glad to take away this burden.
Raccoon leads you upstairs, and you have 3 rooms back and to the right, reserved under the Tebedran name. Do you have any Zephyr, do you have any preference on where you drop off the luggage? Or you're just going to kind of throw it into the first room that you see?
I guess I will. Yeah, I will. I will pretty much just throw it in the first room I see. I'm like, here,
All right.
get it out of here.
All right. So Raccoon, as Zephyr opens, or rather as you open the door, Zephyr just immediately just chucks the weapons and equipment into the room haphazardly and seems totally satisfied. For those entering the city, your carriage is now free of the swamp mud and water, are able to travel much more satisfyingly and unobstructed. And all, especially those who have not traveled much, you're immediately just awash with the activity and the, like, you can see so many exotic things being sold and the just flurry of city life happening around you. And after a moment, the carriages begin to pull a bit away from this, from the more market-centric part of the city, and come to a halt outside of a very bustling tavern. And Gil, you see the king step out of the carriage and kind of nod to you before heading off to the second carriage and knocking against it with his cane. All right, we're here. Everybody out.
Gil will get down and head towards the king and say, "Is there anything you need me to do, Your Majesty?"
He tilts his head side to side and says, "Shouldn't be too much more." And he kind of looks you over, and Summer, as you step out of the carriage, and you can see, did I do it again? I'll just in case, Lucian, as you step out of the carriage. And you can see Summer kind of stopping Caleb from doing the same and kind of whispering to him. You see the form Gil has taken under the effects of the potion. You see that he has taken the form of a short-haired, with the hair kind of spiked up towards the top, thick-skinned human male.
Oh.
Somewhat on the short side, especially compared to his normal self, but otherwise fairly average and unremarkable. And Gil, you see that Lucian has taken the form of a very buff half-orc male.
Fakers.
I offer my hand as she tries to come out of the carriage.
One more time, sorry.
I'm offering my hand to Summer, like a gentleman trying to let her out of the carriage.
She kind of giggles and does take your hand, but shakes her head and said, "I'm afraid not. This is where you guys are going to be staying for now. Don't worry, Dad's assured it'll be totally free of charge for you guys."
That's good, at least.
She smiles and leans out to be able to look at both of you and says, "But we'll see you guys at the ball, yeah?"
Of course.
Remember, if you need to get in, you know how to introduce yourselves. And she gives a very exaggerated bow, clearly getting across, like, lower class, essentially, and smiles at the both of you before shutting the carriage. And the king taps his cane and nods to the very noisy tavern and says, "We have arranged," and he does the coin motion with his hand, "for you to have an extended stay here during the time of the ball, but after that you're on your own, I'm afraid. Anything else I can provide you with before we part ways for now?"
I think that's all, Your Majesty.
He smiles and says, "All right, if you want to try your luck among the nobility and who we're looking for," and he kind of gives you a wink, "the ball will be at the palace from midnight until late into the morning. Bit of party animals. And if you want to try your luck, the nobles and members of the Concord are staying there." And he points pretty much across the city in the distance, atop another hill, almost mirroring the palace, you can see a building about a third of the size, but still fairly impressive. Almost like a medieval hotel. And says, so, assuming I don't get too badly hungover, you can find me there if you ask around. Or see what else interesting you can find. And he kind of gives a wink.
You wish.
And he says, and don't worry, during the daylight hours, there's a lot of events going on. I hear there's a tournament coming up. You could try your luck. Some carnival games, that sort of thing. I'm a bit too old for that sort of thing myself, but if you want to try your luck and earn some coin, good way to occupy your time.
Sounds very likely.
Not really my thing, but I might have some fun.
He gives a shrug and says, well, then for now. And he gives a tip of the cap he doesn't wear and takes your place at the front of the carriage, Gil, and says, well, for now. And he gives you a salute. Yeah. And the carriages begin to pull away. And you guys start to feel that rubbing sensation on your skin again. And as you look to each other, your disguises begin to fade. And in front of you, you see the bustling tavern, and above it, Nortwick's. And that's where we're going to end tonight's session.
Start my drinking.
I
wanted to meet them.
Sorry. You're introduced now, so you'll be able to meet everyone next week. So those of you watching at home, welcome our newest party member. And hopefully this is the first of many sessions for you. So
I look forward to it.
the party has arrived
Hey.
at the giant and ogre and orc populated city of Mercuriald, the capital of the Humor Empire. The party has managed to acquire entry, throwing around Tebadra's name a bit to swing themselves out of difficult situations. And under the guise of being the king's servants, you are now in a city populated by all of your enemies, some of which you don't even know who they are. And for those of you who are nobility, your families are likely here.
Oh.
So we will see what happens.
Probably people Lucia knows probably going to be there.
That's going to be here.
Yeah, just set in.
Yeah, let's
just
poison
said it.
everyone. Oh wait, my father might be there.
So, as the first night of the summer ball begins, the party is now separated from their royal bodyguards and are on their own. Let us see what shenanigans they get into next week. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for playing. We'll see you all next week.